On screen. Uh, Hare Krishna, is my screen visible?
Yes, Prabhu.
Oh, okay. Um, okay, we'll start with the Mangala Charan. Om Majnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swapatantikam Vandeyam Sri Guru Sri Yuddhapatakalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathan Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Paljana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Patan Sagana Lalita Sri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय Hare Krishna. So we meet again for Bhagavatam class. So last week we had the Purushottam Yoga class on Tuesday because I wanted to finish it before the end of Purushottam month. So I did the Bhagavatam class on Friday, just for last week. So starting from this week, we'll be back to the usual schedule. So today will be Bhagavatam, and on Friday we'll have our usual thematic studies. So we are still in chapter 11 of the first canto. We have covered until verse 32 on Friday. So today we'll be looking at verse 33. यद्यपि असौ परश्वगतो रहो गतस्तथापि तस्याङ्घ्रियुगं नवं नवं पदे पदे का विरमेत तत्पदात् चलापि यच्छ्री न जहाति कर्हिचित् यद्यपि असौ पार्श्वगतो रहो गतस्तथापि तस्याङ्घ्रियुगं नवं नवं पदे पदे का विरमेत तत्पदात् चलापि यच्छ्री न जहाति कर्हिचित् यद्यपि असौ पार्श्वगतो रहो गतस्तथापि तस्याङ्घ्रियुगं नवं नवं पदे पदे का विरमेत तत्पदात् चलापि यश्री न जहाति कर्हिचित् यद्यपि असौ पार्श्वगतो रहो गतस्तथापि तस्याङ्घ्रियुगं नवं नवं पदे पदे का विरमेत तत्पदात् चलापि यश्री न जहाति कर्हिचित्. So, anyone want to recite?
Can I try, Prabhu?
Yeah.
Yapai asu parshwa gato raho batas tatapi tasyam pri yugam navam pade pade ka viramata tat pada patak chalapi yach Krishna jahati kar ichiti.
Okay. Thank you, Ruth. Good try.
It's wrong, sorry, Babu.
It's okay. Anyone else? It's meter 11. Okay, so we'll proceed with the synonyms. Yadi, although, api, certainly, asau, he, Lord Sri Krishna, parshvagata, just by the side, rahagata, exclusively alone, tatapi, still, tasya, his, angriyugam, the feet of the Lord, navam navam, newer and newer, pade, step, pade in every step, ka, who, viramita, can be detached from, tat padat, from his feet, chalapi, moving, yat, whom, Shri, the goddess of fortune, na, never, jahati, quits, karhichit, at any time. So if we look at this verse here in the complete verse, we can see chalapi, yat, Shri, but in the individual word by word breakdown, we can see the word Shri here. Shri, the goddess of fortune, but here it's Shri. So this is because of the Sandhi. The original word is Shri, but when it's combined with the surrounding words like Yat and all that, so there are some transformations, but the actual word is Shri, goddess of fortune. Translation: although Lord Sri Krishna was constantly by their sides, as well as exclusively alone, his feet appeared to them to be newer and newer. The goddess of fortune, although by nature always restless and moving, could not quit the Lord's feet. So what woman can be detached from those feet, having once taken shelter of them? Okay, so in the previous chapter, chapter 10, was about the descriptions about the scene at Hastinapur when Lord Krishna was leaving after the war. He was leaving from Hastinapur to Dwarka. So in this chapter, he has already arrived in Dwarka, and when he first arrived, he was received by the residents of Dwarka and also by his near and dear relatives. And then they were also describing and conversing about Lord Krishna's glories. So after those verses spoken by those residents of Dwarka, there are descriptions about how the queens of Dwarka, Krishna's queens, his 16,000 queens, they were also very elated to see him. So this part of this chapter is talking about the description of Krishna's queens, about how they felt, and also not just the descriptions about how they were living in those palaces, but also about how they were still absorbed in the thoughts of Krishna even when he was away from the palace. So particularly in this verse, the main point conveyed in this verse is that even the goddess of fortune, who is always restless and moving, she can never quit the Lord's feet. So even in the Brahma Samhita, there's this verse 5.29. Chintamani prakarasatmasu kalpa vriksha lakshavriteshu surabhi ravi palayantam Lakshmi Sahasra Sata Sambrama Sevyamanam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamam Bhajami. So in that verse, which describes about the spiritual world, about Krishna's abode, there are descriptions about Lakshmi Sahasra Sata Sambrama Sevyamanam. So thousands of Lakshmis being engaged in the service of Lord Krishna. So it's not like merely one Lakshmi serving him. There are thousands of Lakshmis serving him. So even the residents of, the queens of Dwarka, they are also expansions of those Lakshmis. And we'll also see why it has been described that the goddess of fortune is like always restless and moving. Conditioned living beings are always after the favor of the goddess of fortune, although by nature she is moving from one place to another. In the material world, no one is permanently fortunate. However clever one may be, there have been so many big empires in different worlds, in different parts of the world. There have been so many powerful kings all over the world, and there have been so many fortunate men, but all of them have been liquidated gradually. This is the law of material nature. And all the problems which we are seeing in this material world is mainly due to the failure of we as human beings to realize this law of material nature. Over the not just in Kali Yuga, even in the previous yugas, and particularly in this degraded age of Kali, we can always see this competition between the different nations of the world to conquer other nations. There are always these discussions about how whether the future is going to be about a bipolar or multipolar world. But we can clearly see that the so-called world powers, they have never been able to constantly dominate the entire world, simply because, as we have also seen in from our previous sessions, in this degraded age of Kali, only in this age, there are so many nations. Even in the previous Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Maharaj Parikshit, he expanded the entire rule of Hastinapura to cover the entire Jambudvipa. So the rulers in those previous Yugas, they were particularly empowered. They had the ability to rule not just one nation, but also the entire planet. But only in Kali Yuga, due to the degradation, we are not even able to manage smaller political entities. So even in one nation, when one leader is in charge, still there are so many instabilities. But still, those people always think about how they can conquer other nations. And regardless of what we have seen in the past history, at least in this Kali Yuga, we can always see that the so-called world powers keep changing. So that's what is meant by the goddess of fortune, who is always by nature restless and moving all the time. The goddess of fortune favors different people at different times. So different powers have been fortunate to rule the world. And even at an individual level, we can also see that we are fortunate at times, and at times we are also we have so many other problems, whether it's regarding financial problems or health issues. So that is the law of material nature, and will always be bound by this law as long as we remain in this material world. So it is as simple as that. That is the essence of all the revealed scriptures, especially even if we look at the essence of Bhagavad Gita. That's what Lord Krishna is trying to tell us. He is revealing the best way of how we can get out of this Dukkalayam Ashashwatam, from this place of misery. So the message is very simple. However, due to the influence of Kali, particularly we as Kali Jivas, though we are supposed to be the elevated living beings of all the 84 lakh species of living beings. We are supposed to have this realization, but still we fail to understand this simple message. We can clearly see that people are suffering all the time, but they simply fail to acknowledge the problem. Regardless of how much sufferings are there in this material world, though we can summarize it into this cycle of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi, but there are so many occurrences and recurrences of these same problems in our daily lives. So even today, if we simply go to a hospital, we can see that in that place, everyone is suffering. Not just the patients, even nowadays, the healthcare workers, they are also like very, they are unable to cope with the pressure, because in the healthcare sector, even they are vulnerable to all these diseases. Like even when the pandemic first started, when there was no vaccine yet, even many healthcare workers, they had to die in the line of duty. They were merely doing their duty and they had to lose their lives because of that. So even the healthcare workers are exposed to all sorts of risks, even when they want to do their duty. And not just the patients, even the friends and relatives of the patients, they'll also be they'll also be facing a lot of difficulties to look after their loved ones who are ill. So we can clearly see that we are suffering all the time, but we fail to understand the urgency of the message revealed by Lord Krishna. He has given us he has actually explained to us that we are indeed suffering in this material world. And he has also revealed why we are suffering, and he has also given the solution. But due to the advancement of Kali, we simply fail to understand the urgency of the message. And as a result, we are being entangled further in the material bondage. So that's what is happening all over the world, even apart from our individual level. Even when we look at the different nations, they are all fighting for dominance of the whole world. But whenever there's a major problem, like for example, when one nation is trying to attack another nation, even while they are fighting with the other country, all of a sudden there might be some natural disaster which happens in this country which is attacking the other country. So Krishna always has his own plans, his own design to let us know that we are nothing. He always comes out with his own plans to make us understand the message. However, we are so deluded by our material desires to the point where we simply fail to realize the truth. Just because we may be fortunate at some times, it doesn't mean that we can remain on top all the time. So that is the law of material nature. So there's nothing we can do to change this. We can only endeavor to liberate ourselves from this situation, to which the solutions have already been revealed in the scriptures. This is the law of material nature, but spiritually it is different. According to Brahma Samhita, the Lord is served very respectfully by hundreds and thousands of goddesses of fortune. They are always in a lonely place, also with the Lord, but still the association of the Lord is so inspiringly newer and newer that they cannot quit the Lord for a moment, even though they are by nature very restless and are moving about. The spiritual relation with the Lord is so enlivening and resourceful that no one can leave the company of the Lord once having taken shelter of him. As described earlier regarding the nature of the goddess of fortune, she is always restless and always moving. So that's why she keeps favoring different people at different times. However, she's always in favor of the Supreme Lord. Simply because even the goddess of fortune, she enjoys the association, her association with the Supreme Lord. She herself, despite being by nature, despite being restless and always moving, even she herself cannot leave the association of the Supreme Lord. So our situation is such that we are always going after the goddess of fortune. We are looking for so much material wealth and comforts, but the goddess of fortune, who bestows all these material wealth, she herself is attracted to the Supreme Lord. However, we are unable to understand these simple truths. We are going after the goddess of fortune, but we don't know about, we simply refuse to acknowledge the Supreme Lord, who is in a much superior position. We are always thinking that we can enjoy the company of the goddess of fortune without the company of the Supreme Lord. However, even the goddess of fortune herself is by nature, she does not want to leave the association of the Supreme Lord. So if such is the position of the goddess of fortune herself, then why are we so foolish that we simply fail to realize that our position is even it is actually it's meant to be even more menial than that. We are like, our ego is such that we are thinking that the goddess of fortune will come to serve us. Such is our deluded condition in this material world. But we can never change the truth that she herself is always eager to enjoy the association of the Supreme Lord. So as long as we fail to understand these truths, we can never liberate ourselves from all these material bondages. We'll keep suffering from the same problems. And no matter how much we suffer, we still remain in a deluded condition, and we still fail to understand the urgency of the message revealed by Krishna. And as a result, we continue to get entangled in this material bondage. Fortunately, now we have attained this precious human form of life. But if we are going to remain foolish forever until the end of this life, then we may not be able to regain this privilege, because this human form of life is like a very prestigious apartment. The soul keeps moving, keeps transmigrating from one material body to another, to all the 84 lakh material bodies. So this we have also seen in the descriptions from Purushottam Yoga. So now we have obtained this human form of life, in which we have been blessed with the consciousness which enables us to engage in a spiritual inquiry, so that we can actually find out, at least we have the ability to at least realize that we are stuck in this place of misery. At least we have the consciousness to first realize that we are suffering. But it's not that people, even the non-devotees, even they know that they are suffering, but still the influence of material nature is so strong that it simply inhibits them from even endeavoring to find out about the solution to all these problems. The influence of material nature keeps all the conditioned souls in such a way where we simply fail to, though we know that we are suffering, we do not even endeavor to find the solutions. So when we are not even able to endeavor towards finding the solutions, then how are we going to implement those solutions? How are we going to actually work to solve our problems when we are not even interested in finding the solutions? The spiritual relation with the Lord is so enlivening and resourceful that no one can leave the company of the Lord once having taken shelter of him. So as we know, we are trapped in this material body as conditioned souls because of our material desires. We fell to this material world because we did not, we were not willing to actually perform our duty as the eternal servants of the Supreme Lord. Rather, we ourselves, we wanted to have the experience of being controllers and enjoyers ourselves. And the Supreme Lord has been merciful enough to let us enjoy in this material world. However, he himself has made it clear that though we may think that we are actually enjoying in this material world, it is not so. We can merely transmigrate from one material body to another and enjoy according to the consciousness in that material body, with the set of senses given in that material body. For example, today there are so many people who proudly proclaim that they are pure non-vegetarians. So in their next birth, they are very likely to get a particular type of material body, which enables them to enjoy even raw meat. Since they love non-vegetarian food so much, Krishna will also be merciful enough to give them that particular type of body, which will allow them to enjoy raw meat. But in that type of body, they won't be having the type of consciousness which they have been blessed with now in the human form of life. So we have been doing all this merely to satisfy our material desires for material sense gratification. But the problem with material sense gratification is that it can never be satiated. Like, the more we try to gratify our senses through material sense gratification, we will still never be satisfied enough. Like, it is just like pouring oil to the burning fire. So it only makes the fire keep burning. So the only solution is to engage our senses. As long as we are trapped in this material body, we will still be having the same set of senses. So the only way to avoid material sense gratification and to be and also to avoid ourselves from being degraded further, the only solution is to engage our material senses in devotional service. We can still use the exact same set of our senses and also our mind. So there are 11 in total. The 5 working senses, uh, 5 jnana indriyas, 5 karma indriyas, and also the mind. So we have to engage all these in service of the Supreme Lord. It's not like we have to wait until we get elevated to the spiritual world and then we can engage in the service of the Supreme Lord. Even when it comes to chanting, a lot of people keep saying that, okay, I'll start chanting once I can completely clear my mind, once I can control my mind, then I'll start chanting. But it doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. We have to start chanting to start controlling our mind. The more we chant, the more we hear the transcendental vibration, then that would automatically help us to control our mind. The more we keep hearing the holy name, the more we'll be absorbed in the thought of the Supreme Lord. So that's how we can actually even start to practice controlling our mind. It's not like we can attain perfection in the art of controlling the mind and then we can start chanting. It doesn't work that way. So similarly, we have to start being engaged in devotional service from here itself, even while we are in this material world, so that we can first qualify ourselves to be elevated to the spiritual world. Though our aim is to liberate ourselves from this material world, our actual aim should also be to regain the association of the Supreme Lord and also to remain eternally engaged in his service. We have made the mistake of wanting to be enjoyers and controllers in our own right, and that's why we ended up in this miserable place. So we have to completely realize our eternal position as eternal servants of the Supreme Lord. And by being engaged in devotional service, it is completely the opposite of material sense gratification. No matter how much we keep trying to satisfy our material senses, we can never get any form of real satisfaction. But we can always engage our senses in devotional service. It can be as simple as listening to lectures on YouTube rather than watching other sorts of garbage. We can simply listen to lectures. We can also read scriptures apart from our usual routine of chanting. We can actually maximize the amount of time that we spend in devotional service. It's not like we always have to, apart from our usual routine of chanting our rounds, we can still try to kind of optimize our time by avoiding all the mundane forms of sense gratification. We can spend more time listening to lectures. We can spend more time reading scriptures, and it's not like we always have to remain in the temple only. Of course, that is a matter of choice, but for those who have other material duties, we can still try to increase the amount of time we spend in devotional service, because the most basic forms of worship in the Navayuga Bhakti, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam. So services like deity worship and all that, they require more exclusive time. So for those who really cannot devote so much time for the more demanding type of services, they can always engage in Shravanam, Kirtanam. Even while conversing with our friends, rather than talking about some other mundane garbage. We can simply talk about Krishna. We can talk about lectures. We can talk about books. We can simply even apart from book distribution, we can at least do some book reviews while conversing with our friends. We can still talk about the books. Like, even if we don't get to distribute those books, we can still talk to our friends who may also be non-devotees. We can still talk to them about the content of the book. So by doing so, we can actually further increase the amount of time we spend in being absorbed in the thought of Krishna. So that type of service and association will actually saturate ourselves. It will be much more satisfying rather than material sense gratification, rather than using our senses for all these mundane things. We can completely do the exact opposite by placing Krishna in the center of everything. So that experience is what will actually give us the true satisfaction. As Krishna himself has said in Gita 15.7, Mamayaso Jivoloke Jivbhuta Sanatana Manasasandhyani Prakrishtani Karshati. So that itself talks about our original identity and the reason why we are suffering in this material world. In that verse, when Krishna says Mamayaso Jivoloke Jivbhuta Sanatana, he says that originally all the living entities are his eternal fragmental parts. So that is our original identity. But in the second half of the verse, Krishna says that still they are struggling with the six senses, which include the mind, in this material world. In chapter 8, in Gita 8.15, Krishna talks about Dukkalayam Ashashvatam. So he says that this material world is a place of misery, Dukkalayam Ashashvatam. So when we who are originally the eternal fragmental parts of the Supreme Lord, we are not meant to be residing in this material world. Since our original identity is that we are spirit souls, we are parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. So our original position is that we also ideally belong to the spiritual world. That's where we can actually find true happiness, true peace. However, due to our material desires, we have ended up in this material world, and our position is such that we are like fish that is trying to find pleasure out of the water. So we know what happens when the fish comes out of the water. So our exact position is just like that. We can never find happiness in this material world simply because that is not our nature. Our nature is not meant to be part of this material world. We are spirit souls. We are originally, our identity is that we are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. We are spiritual entities, and therefore we can only find true happiness, true bliss in the spiritual world. So just like the goddess of fortune, who actually realizes the powerful association of the Supreme Lord, we being in our present deluded condition, we know that the goddess of fortune could bestow so much material wealth, and that is our limited understanding in our present condition. We merely know that the goddess of fortune is someone who gives material wealth. So that is our degraded condition in this material world, because we don't know about who even empowers the goddess of fortune, because she herself finds pleasure by associating with the Supreme Lord. But we with our in our present degraded condition, we are simply unable to understand that there is a higher, a superior power who even empowers the goddess of fortune. So such is our present deluded condition, and we are unable to understand this due to our foolishness. So if we understand that we are also spirit souls, being part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and if we understand that we are not meant to reside in this material world, then we will understand our real problems in depth, so that we can actually work towards the solution. But with the advancement of Kali Yuga, with so many so-called scientific and technological developments, they are appearing to be much of a more of a bane than boons. Actually, whatever technological developments that we are seeing nowadays, they can also be used in service of Krishna. Just like our mobile phone, we can use our phone even to increase the time spent in being absorbed in the thought of Krishna. We can the same YouTube platform can be used to listen to more and more lectures, but the influence of Kali is so strong that a lot of people don't even know that there are these channels which promote Krishna consciousness. And even the platform itself, the YouTube algorithm itself, works in such a way that the video recommendations will get refined according to our browsing history. So the more we watch garbage, the YouTube algorithm also keeps recommending more and more garbage. But if we choose to watch and listen to more lectures on Krishna consciousness, then automatically even the YouTube algorithm will also start to recommend to us more and more videos related to Krishna consciousness. So we have to endeavor to first get out of this mess. We have to first quit watching all those mundane things, and slowly we'll be able to discover more and more things which are truly pleasing, and the things which enable us to be constantly engaged in devotional service to Krishna. So it can be as simple as performing Shravanam. Apart from chanting, Shravanam is the easiest way, the easiest type of worship in Navayoga Bhakti. So simply by being engaged in these simple processes, we can be engaged in devotional service towards Krishna with whatever time that we have, apart from the time spent for our material duties. So that is the only way we can qualify ourselves. We can at least start to get qualified to elevate ourselves to the spiritual world. The living beings are by constitution feminine by nature. The male or enjoyer is the Lord, and all manifestations of his different potencies are feminine by nature. In the Bhagavad Gita, the living beings are designated as para prakriti, or the superior potency. The material elements are apara prakriti, or inferior potency. These we can see in Gita 7.4 and 7.5. 7.4 talks about the 8 components of material nature, which actually belong to the inferior energy of Krishna. And in 7.5, Krishna talks about the Tatastha Shakti, meaning the marginal energy of Krishna. Apart from Krishna's inferior energy and superior spiritual energy, that this marginal energy which is caught in between. So that is actually our present identity. We belong to the Tatastha Shakti category, the category of marginal living entities, because our original identity is that we belong to the spiritual energy of Krishna. However, due to the material conditioning, we are like caught in between the two energies. However, our original identity is that we are spiritual by nature. Such potencies are always employed for the satisfaction of the employer or the enjoyer. The supreme enjoyer is the Lord himself, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 5.89. In Gita 5.89, Krishna says, Bhoktaram yaktin tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam nyatva mam shantim richati. So this is another simple fact, a very simple truth, which a lot of people fail to understand. Even among the devotees, devotees or theists in general, so they may not be worshippers of Krishna, even the demigod worshippers. When the demigod worshippers, they do not understand that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer. Even the kind of effort that they are putting in for worshipping the demigods, actually it is their freedom, because Krishna himself acknowledges the freedom of those who want to engage in demigod worship. However, he makes it clear that whatever benedictions that people seem to get out of demigod worship, even those are given by Krishna only, because the demigods cannot function independently without the influence of Krishna. However, he does acknowledge the freedom of living entities, the freedom of the demigod worshippers to worship the demigod of their choice. So that's what he says in Gita 7.20 and 21. However, Krishna also makes it clear that in Gita 7.20, Krishna says, Kamesh tasthari rita jnana prapadyantena devata tam tam niyamam astaya prakritya niyata swaya. So in that verse, Krishna says that those who are always obsessed or kind of those who have material desires, they are the ones who always tend to engage in demigod worship. And it is a fact, even in Bhagavatam, there is a verse which explains about the various demigods who are to be worshipped for different material benefits. And that is the fact, whether the demigod worshippers like it or not, they themselves choose particular demigods to gain certain material benedictions, very specific material benedictions. They worship different demigods for different purposes. So even in the Gita, Krishna also makes it clear that he makes it very clear regarding the distinction between himself and the other demigods. There's another verse from chapter 9 of the Gita, 9.25. Yanti devrata devan, pitru yanti pitruta, bhutani yanti bhuteja, yanti madhyajino pimam. So in that verse, it begins with yanti devrata devan. Those who worship the demigods will go to the abode of the demigods. But in the last part of the verse, Krishna says, yanti madhyajino pimam. Those who worship me will attain my supreme abode. So from the Gita, Krishna makes it very clear about his position as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan. And there is a very big difference between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the demigods. Though the demigods are also parts and parcels of Bhagavan himself, we cannot treat Bhagavan as merely another order supplier. The demigod worshippers, they worship demigods with very particular purposes. They choose each demigod according to the material benediction which they can get from that demigod. However, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the one who reveals the true knowledge to us, that we can never attain true happiness merely by going after material benedictions. The demigods, they are merciful enough to give us the material benedictions. However, all these material benedictions can never liberate us from our material entanglement. They'll only cause further bondage. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is so merciful that he actually wants to liberate us from this material bondage. So that is the basic difference that we have to understand. A lot of demigod worshippers who may see that for those who merely see Krishna as another order supplying demigod, so they are likely to get disappointed, because Krishna is not the one who merely delivers material benedictions. He is more concerned about how he can liberate us from this material bondage. So that is the basic difference between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and all the other demigods. So apart from verse 5.29, there are other verses like 7.20 and also 9.25. So in all these verses, we can clearly understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not meant to be regarded as an order supplier, because whatever material benedictions that we get in this present life will be rendered useless the moment we leave this material body. So that's why it is completely unwise to always be obsessed with material benefits. There are also some other misconceptions regarding Krishna. A lot of people among the demigod worshippers, they are also having this opinion that the moment we start worshipping Krishna, we are going to lose all our material opulence. There are such misconceptions also. I won't say that they are misconceptions. It's just that we cannot look at Krishna as merely another order supplying demigod. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead who wants to completely liberate us from this material bondage, and therefore he will not be too focused on merely fulfilling our material benedictions. He actually wants to give us that benediction which is going to benefit us eternally. The material benefits are always temporary. So that's why even among the demigod worshippers, they worship a certain demigod for a very particular purpose. And once that purpose is fulfilled, they may not worship that particular demigod again. Once they have attained that particular benediction, it's very unlikely for them to worship that particular demigod again, unless if they are looking to get the same benefit repeatedly. But as far as Krishna is concerned, he is not merely another order supplying demigod. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all that he is worried about is to liberate us from this Tukalayam. That's why even in the purport for verse 7.16 in the Gita, towards the end of the purport, Srila Prabhupada also makes this point. He mentions that spiritual development has got nothing to do with material empowerment. So we should not worship Krishna as merely another, like how we are going to worship the other order supplying demigods. Of course, we need material benefits to as long as we remain in this material world, we still need to have all these material benefits. But all those benefits or benedictions, they'll all be rendered useless the moment we leave this present material body. So all these material benefits are always temporary, but only Krishna, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only he is concerned about giving us permanent solutions to our problem. That is why he makes it very clear to us that we are stuck in this Dukkalayam and how important it is for us to liberate ourselves. That's what he has been he has revealed in the entire Gita. So it is completely very unwise to regard Krishna as merely another order supplying demigod. So that's what he himself has made that clear distinction in the Gita itself. Though he is the one who actually awards all the various material benedictions through the demigods, but he also makes it very clear that material benefits are always meant to be temporary. So that's why if those who are truly intelligent, they would want permanent solutions to their problems. So such permanent solutions can only be attained by being engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. The potencies, therefore, when engaged directly in the service of the Lord, revive the natural color, and thus there is no disparity in the relation of the potent and the potency. Generally, people engaged in service are always seeking some post under the government or the supreme enjoyer of the state. Since the Lord is the supreme enjoyer of everything in or outside the universe, it is happiness to be employed by him. Once engaged in the supreme governmental service of the Lord, no living being wishes to be relieved from the engagement. The highest perfection of human life is to seek some employment under the Lord's supreme service. That will make one extremely happy. One need not seek the moving goddess of fortune without relation of the Lord. There's also another verse from Bhagavatam 1.2.6. Savai pumsam parodharma yado bhaktir adoksaje ahai tuki apratyata yayatma suprasidati. In this verse, it talks about the parodharma of all living entities, particularly for us as human beings. We can only attain true satisfaction by being engaged in unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service of the Supreme Lord. So that is what is mentioned in that verse 1.2.6. So our devotional service should ideally be unmotivated and uninterrupted. So that's why it is important for us to remain constantly engaged in our devotional service. So with so many, when we have so many other engagements, the most effective way to remain, to always remain engaged in service of the Supreme Lord is simply by being engaged in Shravanam. So apart from our usual rounds of chanting, and apart from our temple service, which we get to do only during particular days of the week, we can always remain engaged in Shravanam simply by listening to lectures or even watching the lectures. Even if we are not able to watch the lectures, we can simply listen to it. So that is, those are more effective ways to always increase the amount of time that we spend in being absorbed in the thought of the Supreme Lord. So only such activities can give us true satisfaction. So devotional service does not necessarily have to be like going to the temple only. We can somehow salvage whatever small amounts of time that we have throughout the day to be engaged in Shravanam, at least the easiest type of devotional service in the Navayuga Bhakti, that is Shravanam. So the more we remain engaged in devotional service, the more we maximize our time of being engaged in devotional service throughout the day. So the more we can derive satisfaction. And as Krishna himself says in the Gita, in Gita 7.14, the more we surrender to him, the more he'll help us to cross over this ocean of material existence. So everything has been revealed by the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is not merely another order supplying demigod. He is the one who is truly concerned about giving us permanent solutions to our problems. Once we liberate ourselves from this material bondage and attain his eternal resolution in the spiritual world, then we no longer have to suffer from this cycle of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. Now, all in this, in our present condition, all our problems are related to these four aspects only of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. And if we fail to understand that we are stuck in this cycle, even with this consciousness of in this human form of life, then there's no way we can get the understanding in other lower forms of life. So it is completely foolish to waste this present life, since we have been blessed with this most precious human form of life, which has also been acknowledged by the demigods and even Brahma himself. Even they acknowledge that human beings are always in a very advantageous position, even compared to them. So we should not waste this present human form of life. We should really make use of it with the also with the mercy of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So by being engaged in devotional service, and also by trying to increase our engagement in a constant manner, so we can actually realize that even the goddess of fortune is so fortunate, simply because she herself gets all her fortune from the Supreme Lord. So merely by being attracted to the goddess of fortune, we can never solve our problems of this material existence. We have to seek the shelter of that Supreme Lord, who is the shelter to the goddess of fortune herself. So that's all for today. We have covered verse 33. Any questions or comments?
Everything is okay, Prabhu.
Okay. So we'll meet again next week. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Hare Krishna, Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.